All right, 12:01. I think we'll go ahead and get started here. Welcome everybody to Johns County Livable Community Aging in Place webinar series. My name is Jeff Kelbach. I'm the aging specialist at Johns County Social Services. I have Scott Hawes here with us who'll be doing some Q&A at the end of the presentation, and I'll be introducing our presenter here shortly. Today's presentation, Wellness in the Second Half of Life. I know most of you, I saw the people that are on right now, so you probably know how to use Zoom at this point. But if you're watching this live on Facebook through the Johns County Social Services page, you can just put any questions you have in the comments. For those of you watching this through Zoom, you can use the chat function or the question and answer or Q&A to put in any questions you have for Beth. The group that puts this together is our Johns County Livable Community Housing Action Team. Big members of this group, Johns County Livable Communities, the Greater Iowa City Area Home Builders Association, and the Iowa City Area Association of Realtors. Obviously, there's a lot more members to it, a lot of nonprofits, a lot of great volunteers in the community who bring great ideas, wonderful presentations through this Aging in Place series. Speaking of the Age in Place forums, we're getting close to the end of these things already. This is our 5th one in the series. If you've missed one, want to watch it, you can go to livablecommunity.org, which has just recently moved to the Johnson County website. You can also find that by going to johnscountyiowa.gov and finding Livable Communities, which is listed as a department in there. Our final Aging in Place series or webinar will be on October 13th, and we'll have that one will be on reverse mortgages, ins and outs. And if you ever need any help, have questions, you can always feel free to give me a call. Pretty easy to get a hold of through email or by phone. That's my direct office number there at 319-688-5842. I'm going to stop my share and I'm going to kick this over to Beth Pelton. Beth is, I got to meet Beth when I was still in school, and she was an associate professor over in health promotion at the University of Iowa. She's now the owner and instructor at Body Moves Fitness and Wellness Center. So Beth, thank you so much for being here today and getting us through this wonderful presentation you have for us.
Well, thank you, Jeff, and thank you, Scott, too, and all of you who are watching now and maybe later, too. There we go.
Perfect.
Great. Well, again, thank you, everyone, and thank you for inviting me to share this time with you today. I've been looking forward to it since Lorraine Bounds called me last April. So this is going to be a fun, short session, and we're going to key in a little bit on exercise and fitness, but we want to especially look at wellness today and where exercise fits in wellness. So we're going to proceed here, and I just want to point out, most of us who are watching this presentation, or if you have comments too, we are in the second half of life, and nowadays, many people actually live beyond 100. So 110, maybe 116 has been a pretty good steep number. So if you are over the age of 50, you are definitely in the second half of life. And if you're not, you know someone who is. I myself am a baby boomer, and we were people who were born between starting in the years 1960 or 46 to 64. But these are the 3 things that baby boomers fear even more than death. We fear disease and disability. We fear dementia, cognitive decline, and we fear running out of money. So how do we deal with this? Because we know that death will come, but how do we stay away from these 3 things that we fear so much? A lot of it has to do with our health, and it's particularly with our wellness. And this is a very established trajectory through life. And it shows, the blue line shows our functional capacity from birth to death, and how when we're first born, we don't have as much functional capacity We're not able to think, put our thoughts together, to move, we're busy growing and developing. We're not independent. Then comes adult life, and you'll see in just a few minutes what we define by adult life to be, where there's a peak that's met, and then there's starting to be a slow decline of our functional capacity through the years. The idea is to stay in that blue line throughout the entire of our lives, rather than slipping into that gold bar that's sliding down into the disability threshold and making us more dependent, less healthy, less well, having much less quality of life. An example with how this works with fitness is the importance of exercise to stay in that blue bar is that after 30, and that's the age I want to refer to about adulthood, it's not 50 or 60 years old, but after the age of 30, our basic physical functions do start to decline at the rate of about 2% a year. So that's pretty remarkable, because I myself think of 30 as being not advanced age. Now, exercise can slow this decline to a rate of about only 0.5% a year. So as we proceed through our adulthood, we are losing functional capacity. But the more components of wellness that are kicked in and that blend together and that are balanced, exercise being one of them, we can slow this decline of functional disability to only about 0.5% a year. So how that plays out is that if you are one who has had little or minimal physical activity through your life, through your adulthood, you're going to lose 70% of your functional ability by the time you reach 90. And that draws us into that disability threshold where we become very dependent. But people who regularly engage in physical activity are only going to lose about 30% of their functional ability by the age of 90. They're going to stay in that, above that disability threshold. So very important to key into health and wellness. These are the pieces. This is the medicine to keep us healthy, being able to do the things we want to do, we need to do, and we like to do until just before we pass on. Health and wellness, however, is very dynamic and shifting through our lives, and I think all of us have experienced that, and maybe particularly this last 18 months, we've experienced dynamic and shifting in our health and wellness. I want to approach really what health is and then what wellness is. This is a very popular health continuum that's looked at in the field of health promotion. And you'll see two arrows on the left and on the right. In the center, there's a dotted line. And traditionally, conventional medicine might view health right there at that dotted line, which really means we are absent of disease. It doesn't necessarily mean that we are well and vital and participating greatly in life, but it just means we are free from disease. So anything to the right of that dotted line leads us into greater and greater wellness. Anything to the left leads us farther and farther into disability, to early death. And the idea is that as we go through life, certainly there's a shifting back and forth across this dotted line, but the idea is to stay and always improve to the far right. To the left, there's an endpoint. It's a well-defined endpoint. We pass on. To the right, there's potential that doesn't end. So it's fun and exciting and stimulating to think of being well through our entire lives. And that brings us to wellness. The National Wellness Institute defines wellness as a very active process. When people become aware of and we make decisions toward a more successful existence. So it requires us as individuals to be actively involved and not to be passive patients, but to be active patients. We are very involved in making decisions about our health and wellness. Wellness is something that's conscious, so it's something we're aware of, we're on top of. We are very involved in self-directing that wellness. It's constantly evolving and changing. And as I said, the potential just doesn't end for what our wellness is. It's very multidimensional, and we'll look at that in just a minute, and lifestyle centered. It's dependent upon the behaviors our health behaviors that we have. And wellness is a very positive concept. It's very affirming. It's a health-centered idea, not a disease-centered idea. We think of health care with wellness rather than disease care. I often think of our healthcare system as, I'm not the only one who thinks this, we have a disease care system. We do not have a healthcare system in our country. So let's think of wellness and health, that right side of that continuum, in this next short time here. These are the basic components of wellness. Now, sometimes you see the model have more than 6 little areas. There may be 7, 8. Sometimes you might see as many as 11. Often the environmental little diagram there is replaced by professional, or it may be replaced by finance, or those two, professional and finance, might be added to it. But we're going to, for the purposes of today, we're going to look at these 6 dimensions of wellness. Our physical dimension, which we don't normally think of as the body itself. Mental, which has to do with our intellectual abilities. Spiritual, meaning sense of purpose. Our emotional dimensions. Social, our social interactions. And then the environment, and we'll talk a little bit more about the environment. So here's a graphic to help you see, well, where am I in my wellness right now? Because it is evolving, it's dynamic, it shifts, it changes. In fact, even this morning, your level of wellness may be different than it will be this evening. So this graphic has just replaced the word environmental for professional, but I'd like for you to continue to think environment there instead of professional. We have 6 dimensions of wellness, and the level and extent of wellness of each of those dimensions changes. You could go from a range of, I'm just not at a very social dimension at all, and that I think many of us have experienced that during the pandemic. It might have been as low as 1, feeling very socially isolated, and that you'll see affects our emotional health, our physical health. It affects all of these other dimensions. Or the social dimension could be as high as 10. Now this is subjective. It's up to you to decide where it is that you lie in each of these dimensions. But if you make a circle on a piece of paper and you have these 6 dimensions, you can plot, where am I today or this week or this month in my social dimension of health? How well am I in my social dimension? How well am I in my ability to think clearly, to be able to analyze, to do strategic planning, to go from point A to point B, to make a recipe, to find my way on a map? How well am I from 1 to 10? And plot that out, all 6 dimensions, and then connect those dots. Now here's some examples of people who might be at different stages of their of the year 2020-21, and you'll see how the person on the lower left-hand corner tends to be in kind of a balance among those 6 dimensions, whereas the person on the upper left-hand part of the screen perceives themselves to have a high level of mental wellness, but you can see the emotional and the physical dimensions of their ideas of where they are with physical dimension are very low. So the idea is that connecting the dots would need to be balanced for a person to say, well, how are you? Well, I'm well. I have good, strong well-being. So that would be the goal, and that means being self-aware of these 6 dimensions. If we're just not feeling on top of our game, what is it about these dimensions that is this off-kilter? So the dimensions of health and wellness also, there are many of them. We're talking about 6 of them today. they're very interdependent. So if I'm not physically feeling well, that is absolutely going to affect my mental clarity. It's going to affect my ability to interact socially. It may affect my sense of purpose. So everything is all those dimensions are very interdependent upon one another. And we want to seek balance. We think of wellness when those 6 dimensions are in balance. And remember, there's no end to self-discovery and growth. Now, back to that dimension of environment. Environment is a very key element, and sometimes we don't think of that in being in our own well. We center upon our own selves, but the environment is space and also people and organizations around us that definitely influence our health and wellness. We can think of the circles around us that are very close to us and have a very huge day-to-day impact. Ourselves at the center, and then our families, our neighbors, maybe your rabbi, your pastor, those people that have your coach, have very direct influence on you and you on them. And then we get to the outer spheres of the environment, including nature, that really affect us. And the important thing to remember is we also affect them in wellness. So the macro is the environment outside. It's the community that we live in. Here's another example of this. So we are at the center, and definitely that's at the micro level, our friends, our family, our social networks. Then those are the micro level. They have a really direct day-to-day impact on us. But the organizations that we belong to, the organization that is providing this presentation for you, it has an influence on your wellness and you on it. Our community, Iowa City, we're blessed with the resources that we have in the Iowa City area, and to keep us well and healthy. And we also influence Iowa City, Johnson County, in our wellness. And then, of course, we have the national, state, local policy that is very high in the news these days, that is having a huge impact on not only our disease, but our wellness and our health. So remember, though, that while these spheres of influence us and our wellness, we also influence those spheres. So you may have heard of the blue zones, which is a concept that was discovered when the National Geographic magazine did an observational study throughout the world. And during the process of that, they discovered that there were centers of pockets in the world where it seemed like people were living over the age of 100, living very long lives, very healthy lives, not becoming diseased or disabled until just before they pass on, being very productive and having a high quality of life. So those who were in the National Geographic world, and Dan Buettner gets primary credit for that. He's the poster child of the whole blue zones movement. They did an analysis of what they were observing in these pockets that were keeping people so healthy, so well. And they found there were 5 blue zones, original blue zones. You can see they were scattered throughout the world. There was one in the United States, in Loma Linda, California. They were scattered throughout the world. And they found that there were commonalities among these communities where people were living very long, healthy, productive lives, not disabled. They were staying above that disability threshold. And they found that there were basically 9 health behaviors that were followed by almost all of these communities. They are these behaviors. So as we look at these health behaviors, these are things that help make us well. These are things that help contribute to all of those 6 dimensions of wellness that are so important to keep in balance. And it doesn't mean that physical activity may be the most important just because it's at the apex of that triangle there, but we'll talk about that first. one thing they found in these communities is that people just before their death, they were moving every day in a physical way. It doesn't mean that they were pressing weight on a bench and running marathons. They were moving, they were gardening, they were swimming, they were walking, they were dancing, and they moving very naturally. They also had, so that would help with our physical dimension of health. The right outlook has to do more with our emotional health and our spiritual health, knowing what our purpose is in life, and being able to center, downshift, to become grounded with self. Certainly, nutrition and diet plays an enormous role in our wellness. It affects our mental health. It affects our spiritual health. It certainly affects the environment, and the environment affects our diet as well. So they found that eating until you're about 80% full was very common in these blue zones communities. A very high amount of plant is consumed in the diets, and a low amount of animal products and dairy products. And of the 4 of the 5 original blue zones communities, there was a very moderate consumption of wine. So that was included in the 9 components. Now, that doesn't mean that you are required to have wine every day. If you are not a consumer of wine or alcohol, then the other 8 are just fine. But they did find that there was an influence of well-being by the consumption of 1 glass of wine per day. Then there's the sense of belonging, and that has a lot to do with the social dimension of health, and the spiritual dimension of health. Whatever you define as family, to have that sense of family, that closeness of the closeness of that sphere of people who are so important around you and you them, belonging to different groups, belonging to a community, and being with those people who have common values and purpose, who have a very positive outlook on life. So those are the 9 behaviors that were observed. And since that time, I think this presentation will be made available later, so you can look at these. I did describe this, so I'm going to move this on, and you may be able to access this later, this presentation, to see this more. Again, the environment is is a very critical factor in wellness, and in the blue zones, the communities where these people are living such long, healthy lives, the aspects of the community that contribute to wellness and those 9 health behaviors is very strong. And it just so happens that Iowa City then became one of the Blue Zones communities. We were very privileged and fortunate for the leaders of Johnson County, or primarily Iowa City, to apply to get assistance to meet criteria for what we call a Blue Zones community. And this emerged and came to be true in the year 2016. So it was a great involvement of the schools, private businesses, the government, all levels of government in Johnson County, businesses, schools, churches, restaurants. And you can see all of these things have to do with the environment that help make us well and healthy. So yay to Iowa City for being a Blue Zones community. Another way we can look at, well, what behaviors do I need to have and the environment around me needs to help supply that will help me be well, stay well, and continue to grow being well. There is an organization, a medical organization called the American Council of Lifestyle Medicine. And membership is with health professionals, primarily physicians who really look at the health side of wellness, as well as the disease side, but very much more focused on health-based and wellness. And these behaviors that the American College of Lifestyle Medicine, they call it lifestyle medicine. And it is 6 behaviors that boil down to eating healthfully. And again, there's a strong influence on eating more plants, eating very much less dairy and animal products, and much less processed food. So that's the diet area, the nutrition area. Keep moving. That goes with the Blue Zones philosophy. Manage your stress, and that is emotional health. Form and maintain healthy relationships that are supportive. You being supportive of others, others being supportive of you. Sleep becomes very important. So that relates to your mental health, your intellectual health, emotional health, physical health, and avoid risky substances. So we immediately think of over medicating or under medicating, of alcohol, of tobacco, those types of risky substances that play into not being so well. So two models that are used in the wellness area, the Blue Zones model that emphasizes different health behaviors that keep us well, keep us continuing to be more well as life goes on, and the lifestyle medicine model. You can see the similarities are very strong. So that leads us back to this life trajectory and the goal that in order to maintain this high quality of life in the second half of life, it really requires us to be actively involved to reach for wellness continuing through our entire lives. And with that, the chances of staying above that horizontal line of disability threshold, becoming more dependent, running out of money, experiencing cognitive decline, experiencing disease and disability, we can greatly avoid that and stay through our entire older years maintaining independence and a quality of life. So I'm going to look at the time here, and good. I want to focus just a little more on movement. Now, in functional fitness, in the area that I'm focusing now in my career, we work with people at the Body Moves who are primarily the age of 50, or we say 50 or better, because we do believe the second half of life is better, much better than the first half. So, but being fit requires more than most of the public knows that. Yes, to exercise, I need to do cardio, and I need to get my heart rate up, and I should do some strength training, like weightlifting or resistance training. Most of the public has heard that, or they know that, or they feel guilty that they're not doing that. But that's only a little part of being functionally fit. Remember, we want to maintain our functional capacity. We want to be able to do the things we want to do, we need to do, and we like to do through our whole lives. And that requires being physically, functionally fit. So in the Functional Aging Institute, which we subscribe to at the studio, we look at physical fitness in this honeycomb manner. It's not just cardiorespiratory, which you'll see that block in the lower right-hand corner. Let's look at the upper left-hand corner, the purple area, where we have cognitive and emotional, that the body movement stimulates cognitive abilities, decreases cognitive decline, helps us get a better sense of what is pain and what isn't pain, certainly increases our memory, our ability to problem solve. Physical activity and exercise, depending on the type of exercise, increases that cognitive and emotional component. Then you'll see another example is that in the center on the lower area, the green area, you'll see the word balance. And balance doesn't mean just to be able to stand on one foot. Actually, our goal is to be able to be with the environment again and be very aware of what's around us, what's beneath us, being centered with our center of gravity. So balance is more than just being able to stand still on one foot. In fact, if we want to prevent falling, we need physical exercise that specifically deals with us practicing not falling. meaning we are probably in dynamic movement as we're trying to maintain our balance rather than static movement still. So I want to stress that if you're doing balance exercises, it is being able to hold still, but primarily it's being able to have the ability to catch yourself, to know the slight shifting of weight that helps maintain your balance. So balance, functionally fit, to exercise, to be functionally fit is much more than doing resistance training or strength training and cardio. It is those, but it's much more than that too. It's a specific pattern. Now, I want to look at the exercise guidelines for mature adults, and I find this very fascinating, what's happened since 2008. So the National Physical Activity Guidelines in the United States in 2008 for mature adults, meaning people who are age 65 and greater. This was what they were. And now keep this in mind because the things were just released last fall and it's changed significantly. In 2008, it was recommended that people like my age get a minimum of 150 minutes of aerobic exercise a week. So that would mean like swimming or biking or dancing or walking, but not that. We want to remember that you'll see walking is good, but it's not the only type of aerobic activity that needs to be done. That transfers to about 2.5 hours total a week. And that was the minimum amount. It could be spread out in different ways during the week on how you would accomplish that. The second thing was, for substantial health benefits, the recommendation was 5 hours a week. So that would be on the average about 45 minutes a day of some type of physical activity. Then it suggested strength training 2 times a week. So it could be using weights, it could be using like resistance tubes, something that's going to exercise the larger muscles of the body twice a week. And they stressed, it was stressed a variety of activities. So getting back to walking, if a person says, well, I walk for exercise, that's one type of exercise. And it basically means you're going forward in an almost pretty, because it's pretty automatic, mindless way forward. So not much upper body work. We're not connecting the brain to the body much in walking. We need a variety of activity during the week. And the other recommendation was get up every 30 minutes. Stop and avoid being inactive. Get the blood flowing. So what happened with study is now, and this is the World Health Organization in November of 2020, published the guidelines for people of all ages, youth, adults, older adults, people with chronic disease and disability, and people who are also pregnant. So this is how it goes. I'm just going to focus on people who are older adults at age 65. And it also includes people who, if you're not 65 or 65, if you have chronic conditions like heart disease, like type 2 diabetes, like obesity or overweight, chronic conditions, and disabilities. Okay, so this is what's recommended now. At least 150 to 300 minutes of moderate exercise, body movement exercise a week, and more than 300 is this is what would be considered the minimal requirement, but more than 300 is highly suggested. So now the minimum has really doubled, very doubled. And so, we might think, well, because I'm older, I don't need to exercise as much. What's the point that is being made by the observations and the research, and now the World Health Organization, is older adults have a much greater need to move than even adults. So at least 150 to 300 minutes per week. Muscle strengthening activities have increased from 2 times a week to at least 3 times a week. Then very high stress. This is a brand new recommendation. Certainly we want to do a variety of activity that was in place before, but a very focused attention on exercises that lead to greater balance, to maintain our balance and increase our balance, to prevent fall prevention. That should be at least 3 days a week. And it really almost every day is a balance exercise day. And they've added this one: replace your sedentary time with physical activity. So what has happened is inactivity has become as big a risk factor as smoking as it relates to premature death or shorter lifespan. Being inactive is extremely destructive risk factor. So the new guidelines for mature adults, people age 65 and greater, and those with chronic conditions and disabilities are greater than for the adult who is not 65, who does not have chronic disease and disability. Very interesting. So what types of exercise can we do? Types are, we've got an acronym in the functional fitness industry, and it's called FAMS. So you can break it down to flexibility, agility, mobility, strength, and stability. So sometimes if we just have an acronym to work with, we can start to remember the components of things. So we want to follow the FAMS formula, the types of exercises that we want to focus on. And since we want to maintain our cognitive health, prevent cognitive decline, exercises that stimulate the 5 functions of the brain. And that acronym is SMAC. So we'll quickly look at that. The FAMS formula: exercises that are focused on flexibility, being able to increase the energy that flows along the long limbs of the body, and flexibility in your joints. So we want to have exercises for that. Agility, which you could easily compare to strength and balance, the ability to stop and start quickly. Agility, quickness. Exercises for that. Mobility would relate to cardiorespiratory, so continuous movement, that exercises that require continuous movement. Strength exercises, those that increase your large muscle strength, and also the small muscles in the core of your body, around your spine. The smaller muscles of the body are also very need exercise. And then stability, which you might think of the balance exercises. So there are different types of exercises that help meet these physical needs that our body has. And then the brain. There are 5 functions of the brain, and if we don't exercise those functions, they become foggy, they become not used, and we experience cognitive decline. So the 5 functions relate to SMAC, and that is the ability to do strategic planning. In other words, you're going to have friends over for dinner. There's a certain pattern that you need to follow from point A to point B, or you're going to create a recipe, or you're going to drive from here to Cedar Rapids. There's a point A, B, C, D that's in order, sequence. How do we maintain those abilities? There are exercises for that. Memory, of course, we focus on memory and the ability to remember why it is we need to remember what we're remembering, looking at keys and recognizing the keys but not remembering what they're for, are 2 different functions of the brain. Then there are exercises for analytical, the ability to sort things out, to compare things. And one function that we tend to kind of put aside is the ability to be creative and imaginative. So exercises that help stimulate our creativity and imagination. And the last function of the brain is the ability of the brain to be able to connect with the brain and the body, for the body to move in its most efficient way. So there are brain exercises, and I don't mean doing crossword puzzles or Sudoku. What the studies have shown is it's fine if you want to do those types of exercises, and what it will do is it will make you a better crossword puzzle worker, but it doesn't transfer to other aspects of your life. So if you enjoy the word games, yes, it will help you be better at word games, but not help you remember where you put your keys, or why you need to know where your keys are. That the two main requirements for brain health are that the body needs to move, and that the body it thrives when it's learning something new. So when we look at those 5 functions of the brain, learning new routes, driving routes from here to Cedar Rapids, learning new recipes, that's new learning for the brain. Creativity is such a very fun way to stimulate and learn new things. So here's what we call the cool down for the workout. This is your brain workout today. And the cool down would mean a summary, a way to put this all together. And that is to remember to be well, to have well-being. Your body wants and it needs to move. So it must move. And that plays into the physical inactivity thing that we have. Your body needs to move. If your body's moving, the brain is stimulated. So your body needs to and wants to move. Secondly, your body seeks a balance in those 6 dimensions of wellness. So I hope you look at that, make a circle on a piece of paper or whatever you have in front of you, and those 6 components of wellness, and see where your balance is right now and what attention needs to be paid to keep the balance. Very important. Movement should bring you pleasure. So if you don't like to golf, there are so many other things you could do to move your body. There's just such a huge variety in one of our NIA forms at the studio. It's called NIA, and there's a phrase we use. It's called dancing through life. And that means we're moving, but it doesn't mean we're doing the rumba or the cha-cha-cha. A dance can be the way that you open your car door. Movement, whatever movement brings you pleasure, should be where you start. And the connection of your body and your brain to the other aspects of your wellness, so important to keep above that disability threshold. Get a variety of movement types each week. Some very popular types of movement for people who are in their second half of life, we find our Tai Chi is a great one that works with many types of the FAMs. Certainly walking, lots of bikers in our Iowa City community. Swimming is another good one. And group fitness activities that you can participate. There's such a huge variety of movement types. Yoga is another example. Strive for a balance of flexibility, agility, mobility, strength, and stability in your daily activities. And include that SMAC, brain exercises that will help you strategically plan, remember why you're remembering, analyze, compare and contrast, be creative, and allow your body to connect with itself. And the last thing is accept the reality. And the reality is that being fit and well are lifelong pursuits. It's dynamic, it's constant, but it's done in taking very small steps that lead to big changes. So I'm asking, as we conclude this part of the presentation, what small step with what we've talked about in the last 40 minutes will you take today in your wellness? And I want to thank you for joining us today. Are there questions?
Scott, do we have anything coming in at this point?
No questions right now.
I do have. So Beth, I was just curious. At 30, you were saying, you're going to be losing some of that physical wellness. If you're sedentary, obviously, it seems like at a faster rate. Is there any chance to regain that once, that's kind of been lost in some way, or?
Yes, we can regain. Yes. Now there is a factor, a physical factor, obviously, that we do experience physical decline. That the body does do that. But to maintain our mental clarity and acuity, our strength of emotional health, our ability to socially interact, and a lot of that relates to our sense of purpose, what we do with our days, how we contribute to our communities or our families, to our creativity and new learning. Yes, we can stave off that decline. There will be some decline in a physical way. The other dimensions of health can help bolster our abilities to be very well. That's a good point, Jeff.
We've got a question from Lorraine, and she says she tried an NIA class. Is this a good type of class to start with?
NIA, yeah, we would pronounce it NIA, like your knee, but we use more than your knee. NIA. NIA is a good movement class to begin with. It is movement that will relate to your flexibility, agility, mobility, strength, and stability. So it will approach all 5 of those components. It can be done at whatever level of fitness a person is at. So you could be taking a NIA class with someone who really has not done intended exercise for decades, and the person next to you could be a triathlon person, and the levels of fitness are dealt very well with NIA. We have a branch of NIA called Moving to Heal, where the classes can be done seated. So the person still benefits if they have fear or disability of getting up and down from the floor. So NIA is a good place to start. Thanks, Lorraine.
I also have a question. Can you tell us where reading fits in with this, especially related to SMAC? And does what you're reading impact where you are on this, I guess, the components of SMAC? So, for example, if you're reading a mystery novel, is that going to have any different type of impact on your brain functions than if you were reading the newspaper or an article in the New York Times or something like that?
Well, I think the level of reading, first of all, can be more stimulating for the brain. Not fiction, and I wouldn't be able to reference you with any research on this, but fiction, mystery, certainly can stimulate creativity and a wonderment of the mind. I think that emotional health and wellness can be greatly impacted by what we read and how often we read it. For instance, the news, how we absorb it, and all that plays into our social interaction and environment. So yes, reading is a very important part of wellness, and also it can positively or negatively affect our dimensions of wellness.
I do have one other question. It seems like all mine are related to the physical dimension. I see all of basically, no matter what it was, whether it was blue zones or whatever, increasing physical activity obviously is a huge key. And relating to other dimensions of wellness as well, but particularly
Mhm,
physically, obviously.
mhm,
Blue zones in particular, though, says that natural movement. And
mhm,
maybe that's what all the other ones are trying to indicate as well. But
mhm,
natural movement, I perceive in my head as being different than saying increasing physical activity, where I'm thinking I got to go to the gym and I got to go do this.
mhm,
Can you talk a little bit about what that actually is, natural
mhm.
movement through blue zones?
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. Yeah, natural movement relates more to what we call functional movement, and that's the ability, that's being able to move, is to be able to achieve daily tasks or a daily pleasure and enjoyment. Now, you might go to a gym or a fitness center to increase your functional abilities in that way. For instance, I'm going to go back to golf, probably because I'm not a golfer. But if you, there are people that say, I want to improve my golf game, or I want to improve my tennis game, or my pickleball game, and you might go to a fitness center or a gym so that you can hone in on those aspects of how you how I can play pickleball better. What aspects of fitness are going to make me a better pickleball player? Or gardening. An example is, if I can't get down to the gardening is a natural movement. Cleaning the house, washing the dishes, making the bed, those daily activities. But if I can't make the bed by myself, can't get that sheet, I don't have the strength to get that sheet pulled over the corner. If I can't bend over to put dishes in the dishwasher, I may need some assistance to build those skills. So natural movement that's really why we do intended, or we why people in the second half of life will go to a fitness center to exercise. It's so they can be involved in more natural movement, functional movement. If I like to bike and I fear that I fear falling, I need to then develop my skills to be able to bike as well. So yeah, the natural movement, it isn't we don't go to the gym or to a fitness center to be able to say I can lift 20 pounds, or I can, I can do a plank for 3 minutes. It's that is used to achieve being able to move naturally.
We have another question. So can you give us some suggestions on good exercises for your brain? You mentioned reading. What are some other things that you would recommend that people can do, either by themselves or maybe in a group?
The one of the easiest ones I could recommend is it is an actual movement form that we actually teach in our studio. It's called Ageless Grace. It's taught throughout the country. And unfortunately, it's not taught much in Iowa, and should be. We need more Ageless Grace certified instructors. But that type of movement works with all of the SMAC areas of the brain. So learning more rhythm. There's a tool in Ageless Grace called Body Math, where we play with rhythm in different ways. For instance, to music, to the beat, we may be counting and changing. We're moving the body all the time, because remember, to get brain health, the body needs to move as well. So we might start with a count of 4 and lift our arms 4 times, and then the left arm, and the brain gets into a pattern. And then we may go to 2s, and then 1s, and then we may say 3, and then 1. So the brain has to think much faster, or to counting in, you could say, I'm going to count in intervals. I'm going to count in intervals starting with 3 and go up by 4. So to the beat, we'd go 3, 7, 11, 15, 19, 23. We could go backwards, 23, 19, 15. So that's just one tool. So music has a lot to do with brain health and connection. movement of the spine, movement of the head, and the balance, the inner ears. This stimulates great brain health. Let's see, moving, what else? Creativity. An example would be pretending that you're playing different sports, even if you don't know how to play them. In Ageless Grace, we often will go through a whole inning of baseball and call out the plays, and you're imagining being the athlete, being the player. Front row orchestra is another tool in Ageless Grace that stimulates the brain. We listen to music and we imagine that we're playing different instruments. So it forces you to focus on the music, focus on the instruments, being in the present on what's the next thing that's coming up in the song. So these are brain exercises that we're doing. We're moving the body, and yet we're stimulating different areas, functions of the brain. Lots of balance exercises are good for stimulating the brain.
This is terrific. I can't thank you enough, Beth, for this presentation, for explaining as much as you have about the different dimensions of wellness. I certainly took some great notes, I feel like, and I definitely will get this presentation passed out to those that are registered. And if anybody else needs it, they can certainly reach out to us. Also, like to thank Scott Hawes, our fearless chair of the Housing Action Team, for being on here to take on any of the questions that come in and read them without me fumbling over them. So thank you, Scott. And really, Beth, thank you. You're terrific presentation, and so appreciate you today.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Jeff and Scott and everyone who tuned in. And keep moving. Now, remember, what are you going to do the rest of the day? One thing is move. Move.
Move naturally, yes.
Move naturally, yes.
Well, we look forward to seeing everybody in October for our final Aging in Place webinar, Reverse Mortgages Ins and Outs. So thank you all, and see you next month.
Thank you. Bye now.